Now, I want to go to a headline in the Herald Sun during the week, and it was a very provocative headline, and it's always it comes up constantly. This, but soccer fans the worst. It was based on a police assessment, really. The police saying that there's just a handful of Melbourne Victory supporters that bother them. They say they're out to give the police a hard time, and so they come up with a headline like this. It just seems to me, though, that look. I attend all of these sorts of codes, and it seemed to me that they're the most focused supporters of all. They support one team, so you don't get arguments between supporters. Australian rules is probably where you get the nastiest crowds because they're just constantly abusing the opposition or abusing umpires. And cricket, you get the most arrests.
I went on the radio on Friday and asked, and we did contact the Victoria Police, my program, to ask them directly, OK, how many convictions have been recorded for serious misdemeanours? How many on-the-spot fines have been issued because of bad crowd behaviour? And I got no response at all. So what we got from that story was one policeman and a series of generalisations about the intimidatory nature of football crowds, which I think is an example of how maybe both the supporters and the policing and the authorities have not come to understand each other. And the Herald Sun, obviously, Liz has left town. Warnie's got his DAX on, so they haven't got 12 pages of that to fill it in. Just got the old file out called Sheila's Wogs and Poofters, blew the dust off it, and just reheated some old wogball warmongering, scaremongering. And that's what that was, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it was straight to the trenches. That's the effect it had. And I think that reaction is too extreme, and that fuelled a lot of the debate. It shouldn't have been code versus code, but I reckon Craig Foster rightly pointed out that this was the treatment of one code versus the treatment of the other codes. And I think football people have every right to feel vilified with their crowd behaviour when set against the one-day crowds at the cricket, which degenerated into a zoo after 9:30 at night.
They don't watch the game.
No, the Spring Carnival has been dogged by arrests and brawls, but that doesn't become the absolute focus of the sport. And I understand why the football faithful feel so bitter that their crowd behaviours find their way to the front page while nobody else's does. I also don't... I think the response is too trenchant, though, and reinforces the divide. And this, I can't cop the assessment that football people believe that watching their game and being a spectator in their crowd is a superior exercise, a superior thing to other football codes.
I don't think that's
elitism,
the case.
It drives me nuts.
I think that that's misrepresenting the broad view out there of football people who are, I would say, bicodal, who love both sports. Now, I know you might be using Craig's article as an example of that, and he's an important voice, but he's one voice. And I think that that misrepresents the general feeling amongst football fans that they like to go to both. They don't want to be forced to choose between their sports. And a headline like that makes it clear that there are two camps. And it's been that way for a very long time. And it's no doubt that the reaction is strong because people who love the sport feel like it's been misrepresented, abused and taken advantage of over a very long time. Now, the response from Craig Foster might be harsh, and it's probably done a little bit of a disservice to building an understanding, but I think it's understandable that it actually occurred. We need some common sense and some people who, like yourself and I, who work across both codes, to be arguing the case for a more tolerant approach to the sport and the fact that you can love both, you don't have to choose.
And by the way, the author of the story from the Herald Sun, I think we have a photograph. Now, this happened 3 days before he wrote the story. He had an altercation coming out of a Melbourne Victory game and ended up belted up.
That's true, and it's a terrible story. But the other aspect of that, the other common denominators in that, I think it was a Saturday night in town, alcohol involved. He could have been on Swan Street, he could have been on King Street, he could have been anywhere, and those factors would have been involved in violence. And we don't have an honest discussion about well, we are starting to, about alcohol, young men and street violence.
I think the dominant culture is very good at protecting its dominance. I think there's a lot of people with a lot of investment, whether be they media outlets or business organisations or club leaders or whatever, and they're very good at rallying around.